Yo, the enemy's public, I gotta keep my eyes open. Pay attention, stop walking around like you blindfolded. This not the World Cup, but Nasir be kicking knowledge. This the type of information you can never learn in college. It's time to fight back, it's no more trying to play it cool. We got interviews, podcasts, and got the latest news. So sit back and relax, we about to get it started. Earth is a canvas, and guess who's the con artist? They brainwashing us, the system corrupted. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. I said you are now rocking with the enemy's public. Hey.
Peace. This is the enemy's public. I am Bro.Nasir. Judge Colleen McMahon of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York rejected prosecutors' objections in agreeing on July 27 to the compassionate release of Laguerre Payen and David Williams and Anta Williams, who are not related. They're three of the Newburgh Four who were entrapped by the FBI in, creating terrorists. Peace to my brother P. Moses. Respect to you, brother. Now, a federal judge admonished the FBI as she ordered the release of three City of Newburgh men convicted in 2010 of plotting to shoot down planes at the nearby Stewart, Air National Guard base and bomb a synagogue and a Jewish center, along with a fourth man, James Cremedy, who has yet to file a petition for release. They were convicted by a jury of terrorism charges in October 2010. The men were often referred to in press coverage as the Newburgh Four. In 2011, McMahon sentenced the men to a mandated minimum of 25 years in federal prison, but at that time she called the punishment probably greater than necessary. McMahon says she reluctantly upheld the legality of the unjust sentences on appeal. Her order last month reduced their sentences to time served plus 90 days and specific that Payen, who has a severe mental illness, be released to a residential program with support services. In her ruling, McMahon said the three men were not sophisticated international terrorists, but hateless, easily manipulated, and penurious petty criminals, recruited by Crumite to be lookouts. Sam Braverman, who represented Payen, said during an interview on Sunday, July 30th, to Spectrum News, that it was a tremendous day when he read the ruling. Everybody knows that these three men lost 15 years that they didn't have to lose, he said. It was Crumite whom Shahid Hussein, a convicted felon working as an undercover FBI informant, befriended in 2008 at the Masjid Al-Ikhlas Mosque in Newburgh and offered $250,000 and other inducements to bomb Jewish facilities and shoot down planes at Stewart. I recall, peace to my brother Big Dog Philly OG, I recall during conversations on bills with the brothers that we have to be mindful. I always said we have to be mindful when we are trying to serve as a vanguard in the community, or we're trying to build our community and stand and act on behalf of our people in our community. And we have some fool come to us trying to recruit us to do things that we know first is not right and makes no sense to do. Now, we're trying to be the vanguard in our community, and somebody's saying, let's go do something illegal. When someone stepped to us like that, we have to get them away from us because that person is acting on behalf 9 times out of 10 as a federal agent or FBI, CIA informant. How many times has people came into our organizations, and you could take, for instance, the so-called gangs in the United States. These so-called gangs were vanguards of our community. They were out here putting in work, doing good things in our community. And CIA operatives who look like us came and made the Bloods and the Crips and all these other black organizations what they are today. And what's crazy about that is they fight on those lies. This moment, they fight on the lies. All the trouble started, all the turmoil, all the banging. And what's crazy about it, it sets inside the sets. They are clicking inside the ranks today. You may have Bloods beefing with other Bloods because of locality, which is even more ignorant than being a part of a damn gang in the first place. Now you're banging on each other, the same organization banging on each other because you're from a different street. Absolutely stupid. Now, the Newburgh Four were arrested on May 20th, 2009 after they placed fake bombs supplied by the FBI outside of synagogue and community center in the Riverdale section of the Bronx, while the FBI celebrated the arrest as a successful operation in its post 9/11 war on terrorism. Now, they said they celebrated this operation as a post 9/11 war on terrorism and called the men extremely violent. When they initiated the whole entire situation, recruiting the men, they posed as terrorists, and they probably was in the organization, in the masjid, and probably was so deep undercover till they rise to official rank in the organization or at the mosque or coming to you as a friendly, as a brother, and then suggesting to you that you do these illegal, nefarious things because the FBI, these federal organizations, they recruit brothers, or you might get in trouble, or you may have been in trouble, or they might just pay you off. Or they might just pay you off to do these things, and they'll send you in and recruit brothers to do illegal activity. Now, the fake bombs and insert Stinger missile launchers used in the sting were supplied by the FBI. According to McMahon, Hussein had to drive the men to Riverdale to carry out the supposed bombing because none of them had a car, the judge noted. Once there, Hussein had to arm the fake bomb because Crumite, despite his training, could not figure out how to do it, McMahon wrote. She accused the FBI of adding the guard base as a target so the agency can pursue the 25-year mandatory minimum. Now, this is outright setups. This is like creating terrorists so they can go all over the world and violate people's constitutional rights and take from other nations their natural resources under the guise of fighting terrorism. The real lead conspirator was the United States, the United Snakes. This is Judge McMahon said. The FBI invented the conspiracy, identified the targets, manufactured the ordinance, federalized what would otherwise have been a state crime, and picked the day for the mission. This is evil. This is wickedness. Her order also highlight Hussein's criminal history, which the judge said includes bankruptcy fraud, immigration fraud, and tax evasion. Hussein, thought to be in Pakistan, is being sued by the family of some of the 20 people killed on October 6, 2018 in Scully County when the brakes fell on a limousine belonging to a company he owned and that his son Newman Hussein operated. In May, a jury convicted Newman Hussein on 20 counts of second-degree manslaughter, and a judge sentenced him the same month to serve between 5 and 15 years. Now, these people were set up by the federal government, by somebody who's supposed to be investigating terrorists, investigating terrorism, trying to prevent terrorist acts in the United States, but they were recruiting and sending people on dummy missions and fake missions just so they can arrest them to make it appear that they are catching terrorists. Now, they are that bored that they would set people up in order to celebrate them going on a mission under the guise of fighting terrorism. I'm going to share some video footage of the aforementioned subject matter. Just give me 1 second. This is outright wickedness. Outright wickedness.
Instead of nabbing dangerous terrorists, these aggressive stings appear to entrap financially broke, mentally ill, or otherwise hapless individuals. Still, the use of these stings has only expanded over the last 2 decades.
More arrests of ISIS sympathizers here in the United States. The FBI nabbed at least 6 people in Minneapolis and San Diego.
The man accused of trying to bomb the Federal Reserve Building in New York also considered targeting President Obama.
These 2 Zion residents tonight claim that government agents made them do it. They say entrapping them in schemes dreamt up by the FBI.
So let's go back to how all this started. After al-Qaeda operatives hijacked commercial airplanes on September 11, 2001, the FBI was the frontline agency put in charge of stopping the next attack.
Global terrorism and the FBI's response to what happened on that day is something that I and almost everyone in the Bureau thinks about for a good part, a better part of every day.
The FBI first built an unprecedented spy network in Muslim communities.
Another state-sponsored terrorist act that they are blaming on other people. Now they get to go all over the world and do what they want to do to people. All they have to do is say they're terrorists and they're fighting terrorists and they're preventing terrorism.
Communities nationwide, recruiting more than 15,000 informants. And to find would-be terrorists, the FBI deployed what was, not so long ago, a very controversial tactic: undercover stings. FBI stings weren't new in the post-9/11 era. Back in the 1980s, for example, the FBI targeted the brash auto executive John DeLorean in a sting. The FBI recorded DeLorean agreeing to bankroll a cocaine smuggling operation as a way to save his ailing car company. The jury in DeLorean's criminal case agreed with some of the early criticism of stings. He was acquitted at trial after arguing that he was illegally entrapped by federal agents. Stings nevertheless continued and became a key weapon for federal agents during the so-called war on drugs. They were so common that they've become part of our popular culture.
Miami Vice, you're under arrest. Turn around and put your hands on the bar.
So after 9/11, the FBI realized that if agents could use stings to find drug dealers, why couldn't they use them to find terrorists?
1-1. Test.
The earliest of these counterterrorism stings involved informants, posing as some sort of terrorist operative, offering the means and opportunity for would-be terrorists to move forward with otherwise implausible plots. An example of this involves 7 poor black men in Miami. They became known as the Liberty City 7. An FBI informant told the men he was an Al-Qaeda operative. But the evidence in the case strongly suggested that the Liberty City 7 weren't plotting a terrorist attack, but running a scam. The FBI informant offered them $25,000, and they appeared willing to say just about anything to get the money. During the sting, the Liberty City 7's leader spoke of bombing the FBI office in Miami and the Sears Tower in Chicago. It was all talk, because the group didn't have money or weapons. But the FBI built a case by asking the Liberty City 7 to give a pledge of allegiance to Al-Qaeda, which resulted in this ridiculous bit of FBI theater.
You will repeat after me. God's pledge is upon me. And so is his compact.
The Liberty City 7 case was so problematic that it took prosecutors 3 trials to convict 5 of the 7 men on terrorism charges. That could have dissuaded the FBI and the Justice Department from these kinds of cases, but it didn't. Instead of abandoning terrorism stings as a tactic, the FBI refined the tactic, introducing more and more actual weapons into the supposed plots, everything from guns to car bombs to surface-to-air missiles. The FBI has run counterterrorism stings nationwide. My colleague Margot Williams and I have been tracking these stings for years. As of the 20th anniversary of 9/11, about 350 defendants have been prosecuted on international terrorism charges following FBI stings. The vast majority of these defendants didn't have the money or weapons needed to commit acts of terrorism. The FBI provided everything. Most of these stings involve the use of an informant, someone either paid to work for the FBI or doing so for leniency on criminal charges. In other words, these informants had direct incentives to find supposed terrorists. The vast majority of these defendants also never had connections to terrorists overseas. The only terrorists most of these people knew were pretend ones, specifically FBI operatives. But the courts have rewarded the FBI and the Justice Department with a near-perfect conviction record in these cases. One reason for that is that the FBI makes the plots look real, coaching targets through jihadi videos.
A Muslim stand up for Allah and our people. Fight for him and fight to create the caliphate worldwide.
And then providing them with bombs that seem pretty scary.
This is what we're going to test. I just call it a Christmas tree. When it's for real, we're going to take this off. We're going to put the 2 other wires in. Oh, okay. It's real simple. All right. Right now, we're just going to fucking test it. I'll go over the whole thing with you.
The FBI claims these stings get potentially dangerous people off of America's streets before real terrorists can enable their violent ideations. But data about these cases doesn't support that claim. That's because of the approximately 350 people who've been prosecuted and imprisoned following FBI terrorism stings, about half have been released, meaning they're back on the streets, available for any of the...
Because it was found that the FBI set them up. They are creating terrorists, yet they are fake terrorists. Because if nothing's happening in the United States, it would be no use to employ these people. Having them walking around in their tight suits and their fancy special weapons and tactic gear, it'd be no use for them. So they're creating cases and putting cases on people, unsuspected people, or they're sending their operatives or their confidential informants in to recruit people and criminalize people. Keep watching. They recruited a mentally ill 16-year-old.
Any of these supposedly real terrorists to recruit. In reality, FBI stings create terrorism plots that federal agents can then foil, and government officials can claim to Congress and the public that they've thwarted terrorism.
We have also seen individuals, including American citizens, apparently inspired by Al-Qaeda's ideology, take matters into their own hands. Again, we have disrupted a number of these plots, including individuals in Texas and Illinois.
They didn't disrupt any plots. They created the plots. then disrupted the plot that they created.
Charged with planning to blow up buildings.
Since FBI terrorism stings almost exclusively target Muslims, the resulting arrests over 2 decades have exaggerated the perceived threat of terrorism from Muslims in the United States.
Exactly. An exaggeration of a threat of terrorism from Muslims and anybody else in the United States. You know the biggest acts of terrorism that was committed in the United States? The biggest acts of terrorism, as bad as the towers coming down in the United States was, killed like 3,000 people. But since then, the biggest acts of terrorism in the United States were not Muslims. White men. White men and their children committed the biggest acts of terrorism in the United States.
That helped create a false narrative.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
But the effectiveness of these stings in preventing real terrorism is questionable. Before Omar Mateen killed 49 people at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, the FBI had investigated him twice as a possible security threat. And with a perceived growing threat of right-wing domestic extremism, we're beginning to see the FBI use stings more often in cases involving potentially violent domestic extremists. Recently, the FBI targeted a group of right-wing extremists in Michigan with a sting involving a ludicrous plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The FBI encouraged the men's anger and extremism.
If this whole thing, starts to happen, I'm telling you what, dude, I'm taking out as many of those motherfuckers as I can. Every single one, dude.
Keep moving. But with the use of a dozen informants, the FBI appeared to make the entire plot possible. When the FBI announced arrests in the case in October 2020.
And then we have these overzealous, racist-ass white people, in particular white men, going around talking about taking somebody out when they are the biggest terrorists on earth, and also the largest terrorism domestically in the United States, or the police. They commit more terror on anybody in the United States, the police.
2020, the supposed plot led the evening news.
Now, in an indictment that reads like a movie script, prosecutors say members of a militia group met in secret underground room and used encrypted communications to hatch their plans.
The reason that the indictment read like a movie script was, of course, because it pretty much was one. It was packaged and produced by the FBI to make it appear like a terrorist plot was foiled, just like it's been done hundreds of times before in the 2 decades since 9/11. But as with stings involving so-called international terrorists, there are questions about how much such stings stop actual right-wing extremist violence. Just a few months after the FBI arrested those Michigan men, a violent mob stormed the U.S. Capitol. The FBI was caught flat-footed, apparently unaware that extremist groups like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys were planning for such violence.
They are so busy planning fake attacks that they were remiss to deal with a real attack on the Capitol building.
That's just more proof that these stings don't stop the actual threats. They just catch the unsuspecting people the FBI can set up as terrorists.
Now I want to go to this next video about the FBI grooming.
The FBI reportedly groomed a 16-year-old with brain development issues to become a terrorist, according to New Intercept reporting. The Department of Justice arrested now 18-year-old Matteo Ventura in Massachusetts last week on, quote, allegations of providing financial support to the Islamic State group.
They groomed him for 2 entire years and then arrested him for what they recruited him for. The FBI recruit you and set you up, and then they say they for the damn crime. That is wicked.
group, The Intercept reports. According to The Intercept, however, the only terrorist he's accused of being in contact with was an undercover FBI agent who befriended him online when he was just 16 years old. He solicited cash donations via gift cards and directed him not to tell anyone about their online relationship.
Ventura's family has reportedly denied allegations that their son was a terrorist and said he was manipulated by the FBI. Mateo's father, Paul Ventura, who is on the left of Mateo in this cell phone photo, told The Intercept, quote, "He was born prematurely. He had brain development issues. I had the school do a neurosurgery evaluation on him, and they said his brain was underdeveloped. He was suffering endless bullying at school with other kids taking food off his plate, tripping him in the hallway, humiliating him, laughing at him." Intercept reporter Murtaza Hussein joins us now to discuss this story. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So this is not the first time this has happened by a long stretch. The FBI has a well-documented history by you and other reporters of engaging in what some have described as a kind of entrapment, connecting with lonely people on social media and inducing them to commit to crimes that they were utterly unlikely or incapable of doing on their own. What is the state of this case right now? He's been arrested. Is the FBI putting up the mission accomplished banner that we've caught a dangerous terrorist, et cetera?
Well, yeah, they actually did put up the mission accomplished banner in the form of a press release immediately after the arrest, which really highlighted the case as a seeming victory against terrorist financing or uncovering of a dangerous possible ISIS fighter or other type of terrorist in the United States. And that initially was also the narrative that a lot of local and regional news outlets which covered the case did, which is quite typical. The FBI press release or DOJ press release following these arrests often drives most of the news coverage thereafter. But I find covering these issues for about a decade now, there's
state-sponsored propaganda news and state-sponsored terrorism and terrorist. This is the norm, and it's nothing new. United States government have murdered their own presidents. So this is nothing new that they will take a young man who has mental issues and recruit him and groom him for 2 years, setting him up to be a terrorist, and when he do what they recruit him to do, arrest him for it.
Very, very often more to the story than initially being proclaimed in these sort of official communications. And this case, I think, of all the cases I've covered over the years, stands out for being particularly egregious for a number of reasons. Rob, you mentioned that, and Bree mentioned that this young man was very young. He was 16 years old when it started. He had a history of developmental deficiencies that sort of would make it harder for him to do something like what he's being accused of. But also, very, very interestingly and importantly, in the course of the investigation, which went for 2 years, Mateo Ventura actually, towards the end, tried reporting the FBI's own informant to the FBI. He tried calling it several times to say, hey, I have information about terrorist recruitment.
That's like going to internal affairs to report abuse of a police officer. You're going to his brother to ask his brother to do something about his behavior. Not going to happen.
I'd like to give this information to you in exchange for some sort of reciprocal agreement. And that's actually how the investigation almost came to an end. Not long after, maybe about a month after he started calling the FBI and trying to report this informant with their own employee, FBI undercover employee, he was arrested by the FBI. So there are a lot of very, very troubling aspects of this case. And I'll add that also this is the government's own narrative. This is not even the defense narrative, which will probably raise other extenuating factors. The government's own narrative is that this is what they're doing for them for 2 years, and he even tried reporting themselves to the FBI. So I think that it shows that in many cases these investigations and these arrest announcements they bear very, very little resemblance to what the narrative the government's going to put forth and what you can call these sort of mission accomplished press releases and public statements.
So how did they end up targeting Mateo in the first place?
They do celebrations and say, mission accomplished, after setting somebody up to do a fake terrorist attack, provide fake bombs, fake, terrorist equipment. And then when they go to do what you recruited them to do with your fake stuff, you arrest them. They have federal charges, and you say mission accomplished. Meanwhile, real shit is going on in the United States. You have a tyrannical police department that's committing terrorism. They should be investigated as terrorists themselves. But they are setting up people who live in the United States. I'm trying to watch my word because my brother sent me something that awakened in me about this citizenship. So I'm trying not to call people citizens because that makes you a ward of the state when you say you're a citizen. But for the sake of argument, they'll take and they would incriminate somebody off the street, set them up, arrest them for it, and then say mission accomplished. I guess that's your mission, to set people up.
Are we to understand that the FBI is just trolling internet chat rooms for 16-year-old children who they can induce into believing that they're having a relationship with ISIS and to not tell their parents about it? I mean, why did they even drill down on Mateo of all the people on the internet in the first place?
So the FBI does engage in informant and undercover operations, both in the real world and online, quite extensively, focus on different communities and different ideological subgroups. In this case, they found someone online, they developed a relationship with them, a friendship with them over the course of a number of years. And when you're 16, even without developmental or neurological impairments that Mateo had, you can be quite impressionable and you can want to impress someone online who's your friend. This FBI informant told Mateo, gave him compliments about his physical appearance. He asked him to send him videos and photos of himself, complimenting him on his beard and saying things like that. Well, if you're a kid who's experiencing bullying in school, it could be quite, could really get an emotional tie with you. So the FBI visited Mateo's house some time ago, early in the investigation, and met his father, met him, and told him, hey, your son's doing things on the internet, which you shouldn't be doing. You should keep an eye on that. And that's really an appropriate response, actually. But his father said that after that initial conversation, when the FBI connected Mateo with someone who they said was a counselor, he never heard from them again. He thought the issue had gone away. In reality, they continued talking to him for the 2 years. And then at the end of it, I think they'd have to know that he wasn't really a threat. He had no plan on his own to commit any act of violence. He was not in touch with anyone from ISIS that we know, other than the FBI's own employee. He declined several offers or attempts to try to travel abroad at the FBI's.
The FBI agent should be in prison for what he did to this child, grooming him and doing that to him. He should be in prison for starters. I'm not going to say what else he deserved, but they should start with prison.
Requests to go join ISIS, which he didn't even know existed at that point. And still, when he turned 18, after investigating from age of 16, they arrested him. And I think that from my own perspective,
arresting him at age 18, started grooming him at the age of 16, wanted to make sure that he was an adult before they arrested him, but didn't arrest the FBI agent for grooming a minor. That's the United States for you.
Looking at these cases like this for many, many years, I think there's institutional impetus to do that. The reason is if you sink 2 years in investigating somebody, regardless who they are, if they're a threat or not, it's a lot of labor cost. It's a lot of resource devoted, and you feel a pressure to generate cases. And you're rewarded as an FBI agent for generating cases, for generating arrests, not for walking away from cases. You're rewarded for those big splashy headlines and press releases. So I think in this case, More could come out about this case at discovery and trial, but it seems very, very strongly it's one of those cases in which the FBI helped generate a case by grooming or otherwise encouraging a very vulnerable young man to break the law. In this case, by doing something very trivial, most people would say, by sending small amounts of gift cards to an FBI agent at their request.
You say they were trying to induce him to travel abroad. Did they have a specific plan for him or something, or an actual violent act they were trying to get him, or they were trying to persuade him to agree that he should travel to the Middle East to meet with an ISIS recruiter or something like that?
Well, there's so many things about this case which are so eyebrow-raising when you look at the government's complaint against Mateo Ventura.
When we think that we have unveiled everything, we unveil something else. These people are wicked. They will always be wicked. And again, lack of participation in any organization, even if it's this corporation, will destroy it and ultimately end it. So we need to stop participating in this system. It's wicked and it's not made for us.
He didn't seem to know where ISIS was, because ISIS, a couple of years ago in its main territories of Iraq and Syria ceased to exist, more or less. So he had to kind of be guided that, hey, if you want to leave your country, if you want to leave the United States, you can go here, you can go to Egypt. He was asked to do this several times when he was 17 and 16 years old. And when he was 17, he actually came up with an excuse. This is by the FBI's own narrative. He said that, I can't join ISIS anymore. I hurt my leg. I hurt my leg, and I can't join this group anymore. I'm sorry, I can't talk anymore. So he tried to get out of it. And later on, when they tried to help him book flights or encourage him to book flights to Egypt, he didn't show up for his flight. He didn't show up that day. He stayed home, and he started calling the FBI and trying to report what was going on. And you have to keep in mind that a lot of the communications between Mateo, the FBI, and the FBI informant are included in the court documents today. And they really speak to somebody who is not, intellectually fully developed. As a young person, but also somebody with, some of the issues his father talked about premature birth and the implications of that. He's trying to negotiate with the FBI, asking them for $10 million in duffel bags full of cash and immunity in exchange for reporting their own informant to them. He's, coming up with very childish or juvenile sort of excuses why he can't talk to the FBI anymore. And they're still insisting and talking to him and sort of, keeping the door open to that. So it's somebody who I think is very, very unlikely to have been able to pull off, any type of violent plot, which was not a specific plot mentioned at all in the allegations against him. Very unlikely to be able to travel on his own. He couldn't book flights because he didn't have a credit card, didn't have a passport, all things which the FBI encouraged him to get on his own.
He didn't even have the proper credentials to travel abroad, but I'm certain that the FBI was going to provide it for him because that would get him deeper into what they had, their mission for him. We just got him in deeper. Wicked.
And, it seems like there's somebody who needed help, right? Or need from his family or from law enforcement, his family, to guide him away from online activities he's with. Unfortunately, instead of getting that help, they kind of helped the moment came when they arrested him.
Well, what a just very disturbing case, obviously bad on its own and really an indictment of what the FBI's priorities are. We have a lot of criticisms of what the FBI chooses to focus on. To do this for 2 years is just is incredible.
Switch up to the next video where the
This is
FBI,
Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.
courtesy of Democracy Now!, FBI orchestrated conspiracy judge ordered release of 3 of Newburgh, 4 tied to fake New York bomb plot.
I'm Amy Goodman. A federal judge has ordered the release of 3 New York men who were sentenced to 25 years in prison for their role in a government-orchestrated bombing plot. The men, who were all Black and Muslim converts, became known as the Newburgh Four. They were convicted in 2010 and sentenced to 25 years in prison for placing what they thought were bombs in a New York synagogue. Supporters of the men have long argued they were entrapped by the government. On Thursday, U.S. District Judge Colleen McMahon issued a stunning ruling ordering the compassionate release of 3 of the 4 men. In her ruling, she wrote, quote, "A person reading the crimes of conviction in this case would be left with the impression that the offending defendants were sophisticated international terrorists committed to jihad against the United States. However, they were in actual reality hapless, easily manipulated, penurious, petty criminals." McMahon said the men were not terrorists, but, quote, impoverished, small-time grifters.
And that's who they target. Impoverished drifters, offer them money, and sort of make them offers that they can't refuse. And a lot of times they victimize them, threaten to put them in prison. Again, they also come as a friendly, like they're your brother. I'm certain that these agents came to these brothers portraying Muslims. I'm certain that's how they did it. Suggesting that they do all this illegal stuff, setting them up. As soon as they set them up with the fake bombs and the plot, they was arrested for it. And then the FBI celebrated. They actually celebrated setting somebody up like they foiled a damn bomb plot that they initiated in the first damn place.
And drug users, street-level dealers who could use some money. She wrote, quote, "The FBI invented the conspiracy, identified the targets, manufactured the ordnance," unquote. The FBI has relied on an informant who was involved in several other high-profile entrapment cases within the Muslim community. Democracy Now! Has closely followed the case of the Newburgh Four since 2010, when Democracy Now!'s Anjali Kamat and Hani Massoud and Jackie Suwin of Big Noise Films traveled through Muslim communities in New York and New Jersey to track the Newburgh case and 2 other entrapment cases. In October 2010,
all this conspiracy happened, in my area, in OG Philly's area he used to live in. They were targeting all Muslims from New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. If you were Muslims in that area, you was a target back in the 90s, because the first World Trade Center bombing was in 93. And then when 9/11 happened, everybody who were Muslims were targeted. And most of these brothers were set up. We're not even terrorists. We're set up. Manufactured terrorists.
10, Democracy Now! Aired a special investigation into these cases. This clip begins with Anjali Kamat.
On May 20th, 2009, 4 African-American men from the city of Newburgh, New York, were arrested outside a synagogue in the Bronx. Known as the Newburgh Four, they made national headlines as stark examples of homegrown terror.
Prosecutors described the suspects as extremely violent.
Called them homegrown terrorists when they were recruited by the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
Men who embraced every opportunity for terrorism.
More than a year after their arrest, the Newburgh Four are now facing...
And then they have the state-sponsored media, Multi-Ethnic Destruction in America, who actually cooked the bomb with their propaganda. All the FBI have to do is give a statement, and the media is going to run with it. No investigative journalism to see if these devils are lying, and they were lying. They were lying.
trial in Manhattan for conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction and anti-aircraft missiles. But the case has raised serious questions about the government's role in creating and then foiling fake terror plots.
The suspects were duped. The bombs and missile were fake, supplied by the FBI and NYPD.
Alicia McCollum is the aunt of David Williams, one of the Newburgh Four. Since his arrest, she's tried to mobilize support for her nephew. Taking the train to the first day of the trial in August, she's visibly upset.
I was restless last night. I couldn't even sleep. It was just so much. You think about the family and what you're getting ready to go through. And it's like this whole year fighting for the case. And now it's like finally happening. We're going to trial. And just worry, that the government, want to make a case so bad that my nephew can go away for life. So it's just been like heavy on my mind last night. Very heavy.
Like the other members of the Newburgh Four, 29-year-old David Williams lived in the economically devastated city of Newburgh and had served prison time on drug charges and petty criminal offenses. All four men were converts to Islam, and one of them, Laguerre Payen, is a Haitian-born immigrant and a paranoid schizophrenic. Alicia says she was shocked when she heard that these four men were being called terrorists.
That was an excerpt from the 2010 Democracy Now! Investigation by Angelique Comet and Jackie Suin. Alicia McWilliams McCullum went on to directly accuse the government of entrapping her nephew.
This is entrapment. You're going to send an informant into a impoverished community, the most impoverished county, to do your trickery. You ain't stumbled upon a cell. Nobody ain't tell you that someone was plotting to do anything. You created a crime.
That was Alicia McWilliams McCullum speaking in 2010. She died last year after fighting for over a decade for the release of her nephew, David Williams, and the other members of the Newburgh Four. Well, David Williams, Anta Williams, Laguerre Payen will now be released within 90 days after last week's stunning judicial ruling. We're joined now by two lawyers who are part of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, which was founded in 2010 to challenge preemptive prosecution and the post-9/11 targeting, surveillance, and criminalization of Muslim communities. Kathy Manley is legal director for the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, and Stephen Downs is the chair of the Coalition's board of directors, former chief attorney for the Commission on Judicial Conduct in New York State. Stephen Downs and Kathy Manley, welcome to Democracy Now! Kathy Manley, why don't we start with you? The significance of this ruling yesterday by the federal judge. Tell us exactly what she said and how this came about after it's been well over a decade.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Thanks for having us. It was, at first I got to say, it was so poignant to hear Alicia's voice because she was at the heart of the support for these men all these years. She brought a lot of us together. She inspired us. And when we filed this motion, she was still alive. And we really, really wanted her to see this, to see them get released. And unfortunately, that wasn't to be. Hopefully she's up there smiling. But this is a significant ruling. This was a wonderful decision. It took 1.5 years to happen, but we're so happy that the judge was
big facts, Rob Warren. Big facts.
This case was unfair. She called it the unterrorism case from day one. And she always understood that the 25-year mandatory minimum sentence was way too harsh. But there was nothing, she believed there was nothing she could do about it because basically there is no entrapment defense in the law. And I can talk about that if I have time. But there was no way for her to avoid doing this, she believed. And when we filed this motion, that gave her an opportunity in a compassionate release motion to say this sentence is too harsh. And she did say so. And it is a wonderful ruling because it shows that the government created this entire case. The judge is saying this is what we've been saying all along. She couldn't say it was entrapment because there's no entrapment defense. The law doesn't consider this entrapment. Mic check. It's the classic definition of entrapment. And we're just really grateful that she understood the unfairness of this case, and now they will be released.
Stephen Downs, if you can lay out the case for us, and also let's be clear that the judge, Judge Colleen McMahon, is the original judge, right? She has basically reversed her decision.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for having us on. This is a wonderful, Democracy Now! Has stood with us for years in calling out the unfairness of this case, and I think people were onto it very early. What simply happened was that the government sent down their key man, Shahid Hussein, who had entrapped people up in Albany and had nothing better to do with him. So they sent him down to hang out in a mosque in Newburgh. And the mosque very quickly caught on to him that he was a phony and a government
Salute to my brother, Big Dog Philly OG.
So he went out into the parking lot and began to talk to anybody he could find. So let's do jihad. Let's get involved. I'm incredibly rich. I've got money, money, money.
Mike check, can you hear me,
Some
brother?
guy who was Cromedy, who got interested in this, not because I think he was at all interested in jihad, but because he was interested in the money. And they talked off and on, and Cromedy backed out after a while. And then Shahid Hussein realized that he was going to lose this fish that he had hooked unless he upped it. And so he came back to him with an offer saying, I'll pay $250,000. And he later.
Now, they wasn't going to, they offered that money, not going to give it to him. They wasn't going to give the money, knowing they wasn't going to give it to him. They offered them that money to make it look attractive, to do the plot, the fake plot. That's a part of the setup to make it look attractive and worth their while. Because more than likely, when they first came to them, again, they came to them acting like they was a brother. And then my sentiment is when somebody come to you suggesting that you do something illegal or harmful to other people, you got to look at them twisted. You got to look at them like agents, because that's 9 times out of 10, that's what they are. And get their people away from you because they're trying to set you up. They're trying to set you up. You got to get people like that away from you, coming to you, suggesting that you do something you know don't make sense. Why do they fall for that? Why do they fall for that? It's the same as if you're in a so-called gang and you got brothers across town who's not bothering you, and you got some fool saying, let's go over there and hit them because of whatever reason. Yet the reason don't make no sense. But nobody stopped to think of why would we be doing that when these brothers over there is not bothering us, especially if you got brothers on the other side who handling business. I'm not speaking about doing illegal activity. I'm speaking about being a vanguard of our community. That's why I don't understand when people who say they want the same thing for our people bang on each other. When you're supposed to want the same thing for our people, if you want the same thing for our people, you do what you do, and the other brother or sister do what they do. And then it's more for those of us who you are standing and acting on behalf on. But it's backwards as hell to want the same thing that your brother or sister want for your people, but y'all going at each other. It's absolutely stupid to me. And it's childish, and it make us look like damn fools.
Later tried to deny that in a lie, and the government allowed him to do that. But there's a tape recording. I was actually making that offer, $250,000. And so they decided to go ahead with this plot. I believe somebody all along intended to try to get the money and not to do anything, not to harm anybody, because that was not his nature. Just before the plot was to go.
Big Dog, you want to tap in? Just have me pause the video, brother.
Nah, you good, brother. I'll wait to after the video. Much love and respect to you and the family, brother. Much love and respect to everybody in the chat.
Larger numbers. It wouldn't look good if they were just entrapping one person. So they told Cromedy he needed some lookouts. And so he went out and hired and recruited these 3 young kids who just needed money. And in one case, certainly in David Williams' case, he desperately needed the money to get his brother a liver transplant. And so they joined in for a very brief time, and then the whole thing.
Can you imagine that? You know, dealing with somebody's desperation to save a loved one's life through a kidney transplant. And that's how you see they profile you. That's how they find out that you need that money. They profile you. Because the FBI are investigators and they know you need that money, and that's how they come to you. Because they profile you.
And came down on top of them. There was, I think, never any doubt that the whole purpose of this was the government trying to buy crime with money, offering money to get the crime. It had nothing to do with terrorism. It had nothing to do with protecting a community against a group of people. What I find really offensive about it was that they then took these entrapment cases and turned them on the Muslim community and used it to generate hatred against the Muslim community by making all sorts of lies and exaggerated statements about what the case was about. They became a purveyor of hate, really, against the Muslim community. And the government has absolutely no business doing that. So that's how it happened.
In 2014, HBO aired the documentary The Newburgh Sting, which featured secret recordings of conversations between the undercover FBI informant, Shahid Hussein, and James Cromedy, one of the men who became part of the Newburgh Four. You have to listen really carefully because some of the audio can be hard to understand. The clip begins with James Cromedy.
None of these brothers got jobs, huh? Only there's 3 of us without no jobs. Sure. But actually, how you think we feel? We getting ready to do all this, we ain't got no money in our pockets, How you think we feel? Look at me, brother. How you think they feel?
If these brothers are doing for money, I don't need them. Subhanallah.
No, I talked to them already. They already know.
Okay. And
they're not even worried about it.
It is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's all it is. And if they won't need for money or greediness, or they think they're going to make any money or angerness, please do not, because this is jihad. This is jihad, and that's what jihad is.
But you know what they thinking, They can use the money, though.
So, and that's FBI informant Shahid Hussein and James Cromedy, one of the men who became part of the Newburgh Four. Kathy Manley, if you can talk about who the FBI informant was, the fact that he had fled Pakistan, perhaps wanted for murder. He didn't want to be deported, so he was desperate to entrap these men or do what the FBI wanted.
Yes, he was at one point wanted for murder in Pakistan. I don't know the details of that, but after having seen his trajectory in the U.S., it's a long trail of slime. Like, he just kept ripping people off, conning people, tricking people out of their money, and then eventually was caught in a case where he was defrauding the DMV. He was getting people fake driver's licenses, working with a corrupt DMV employee, and the FBI was going to send him to prison and then deport him to Pakistan. But instead, they gave him an opportunity to work for them in Albany. In our case, the case of Yassin Aref and Muhammad Hussein.
This is the same thing that they did to William O'Neill. William O'Neill was a willing participant, coward punk, who gave the diagram of where the brother Fred Hampton was sleeping, so the FBI and the Chicago PD can go in and murder Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton stole a car, got caught. They put an FBI agent on him for stealing a car, and he infiltrated the Chicago chapter of the Panther Party. And the young brother, Fred Hampton, was subsequently murdered because William O'Neill set him up. William O'Neill had risen to official capacity, head of security. He was head of security. He cooked them dinner the night Fred Hampton was murdered, spiked Fred Hampton's drink so he can fall asleep and can't even fight when they come to the door to murder him. The man was murdered in his damn sleep because of that. That's how deep and wicked the federal government is.
Hussein, and he did very successfully wrongfully prosecute them. He's so deceptive and slimy, and they ended up getting convicted and sentenced to 15 years. And we thought, this guy is so dishonest, and the jury hated him. They probably won't use him again. But sure enough, we found out they used him in the Newberg case, and they used him in other cases. The FBI loves this guy. And after the Newberg case, they used him in the Khalifa al-Akili case in Pittsburgh. And that was featured in the documentary T-Error by Lyric Cabral and David Sutcliffe. And that actually featured the clip of Shahid Hussein offering James Cromedy the $250,000 when he didn't realize he was being recorded. So this guy, then he went on to form this limousine company in the Albany, the capital region. And that was very tragically.
Yeah, they gave William O'Neill, for his services, they gave him a gas station. They gave him a gas station after the mission was complete with Fred Hampton. That was his reward. Gave him a gas station.
The limousine that killed 20 people in Schoharie County in 2018. And he was in Pakistan at that point, letting his son run the company and basically telling him how to do it, telling him, don't worry if the brakes don't work. It doesn't really matter. We don't care. And his son is now doing 5 to 15-year sentence while he sits in Pakistan hanging out with his super rich brother Malik, who kind of destabilized the government in Pakistan. So this guy has a long history.
So
that's what they do, Rabon, at those sundown towns. If one of us is caught in a sundown town, either we are arrested, like you said, tied to the railroad, or worse. If we're caught in those sundown towns, anything's subject to happen to us. 2023, they have states that got 40, 50, and over 100 sundown towns, but they want us to believe that we're living in a post-racial society. Young people are going to houses by mistake and being shot at, and being shot and being killed because they're at the wrong address. Because they're in a sundown town, they look through the door and they see how we look and they go for their gun.
Stephen Downs, let's end with you. You have 3 of 4 of the Newberg 4 going to be released within 90 days, compassionate release. What happens with Cromitty, the 4th? And then the fact that this FBI informant who did a sting operation in Albany, the Fort Dix 5, Pittsburgh, does this all begin to unravel these cases?
Well, first of all, I just saw a letter.
They're sending this dude all over the country, setting people up. Hopefully, somebody gonna catch on and serve justice. Justice is a reward or penalty. Just know that justice is a reward or penalty. And he's on the penalty side of justice. And I hope that someone recognize who he is when he go to another state and try to set another brother up.
From Cromitty's
Enemy Public, real
lawyer
quick, my brother.
He's sending to the court asking to be appointed to represent him. So I'm pretty sure that Cromitty is going to make a move to also be released. Of course, his case is different than the others. All the cases are slightly different, so he will have to present that to the court. But I think it looks pretty good that the judge will grant that. In terms of the second part of that, there's a lot of cases that look like this case. This is a particularly clear, dramatic example of it. But this was the government standard operating procedure right after 9/11. They were out there going to create as many terrorists as they could to show the public, I think, that they were on the job, that they knew what they were doing, that they were keeping America safe. And if they couldn't find any real terrorists, and they couldn't, there really weren't any real terrorists around, they had to create them. And that's what they did. They created these terrorists.
When you are pulled over by the police, your life is in danger. Those are domestic terrorists themselves. And they are setting up people, recruiting them, promising them money to do fake bomb plots and terrorist acts. And they want us to believe that these people are terrorists when somewhere in the United States, right now, somebody is falling a victim of tyranny and terrorism by the local authorities.
Terrorists. So we have a lot of cases out there. The Fort Dix 5 is one. The Holy Land 5 is another case. Afia Siddiqui is another case. You can go down a whole long list of these cases. And some of them, and particularly the Holy Land 5 and the Newburgh and the Fort Dix 5, have essentially life sentences. They will probably die in jail. So there's a really high priority on us trying to get these cases out, these people out. And so we're going to really need a lot of work to go in there and start to try different theories to get them out. This case is a godsend to us. It really underlies the whole hypocrisy of the government's position and allows us to argue now in these other cases, the same thing happened here. This is no different. You just have to look at the facts and realize that these people were set up. So I see our work is cut out for us now. This particular case shows the way. It may not be through compassionate release motions. We may have to try other strategies. But I think, in a way, what it does is it breaks the assumption that these cases were real cases. It shows that the government had a policy of creating cases when they couldn't find any real cases, and then pretending that they were real cases and demonizing the Muslim community.
On all levels of law enforcement, they create cases, all level.
Mic
From
check,
the city
mic check.
to the
Can you hear me?
state, all the way to the federal government, they create cases. Don't get that twisted.
In the meantime. So that's what we're going to have to work on, I think, over the next few years.
Well, we want to thank you both for being with us. Stephen Downs, chair of the board for the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, former chief attorney of the Commission on Judicial Conduct in New York State, and Kathy Manley, legal director for Coalition for Civil Freedoms.
Get my brother Big Dog Philly OD up here.
Mic check, mic check.
Mic check, mic check. You loud and clear, brother.
Much respect to you and the family, brother. Always much love and respect to everybody in the chat, man. You know, this is bringing back memories when I was a young and I was practicing Islam and I was going to the masjids.
Indeed.
And I had an inner feeling that basically told me to stop going because they were investigating them. And, you know, back then, like I said, I had a real, my beard used to touch my belly button. So I had a real big beard. And, you know, I used to go to the masjid faithfully, you know, in Philadelphia, you know, and something, like I said, something told me, like, back up from it. I still practiced Islam back then, but something told me to back away from it. And it was one time when I was, you know, about to travel out of the country, and somebody told me, you need to cut your beard, man, because you're going to look like those terrorists that be on them planes. You know what I mean? So I cut my beard. I stopped going to the masjid as much because I seen what this corporation was doing. Basically, they was demonizing Islamic community.
Indeed.
And I was a part of that Islamic community. They was investigating different masjids in Philadelphia. You know, and they were saying that they were funneling money for terrorists through those masjids for a reason to investigate.
Exactly. I remember.
But that's all I wanted to say. Go ahead,
I
brother.
remember that because the first World Trade Center bombing, they say those guys were from New Jersey.
Yes, sir.
A blind imam was sentenced to life in prison for the first, the 1993 bombing. But, I don't know if those guys were set up, because I always say to people, when they do these drills and they do these mock incidents, don't go to those drills and those mock incidents, because they can make something real happen at those mock incidents and those drills. Real things do happen on what they call them these false flags. Real things happen during false flags. But to get you to not believe it, they do it during a false flag. We have to be mindful of that. Olympics being bombed in Atlanta, the Boston Marathon, or any of these drills or mock incidents that they have. They'll make something, because all they're doing is pointing the camera while it's going on. They make something real happen, then they call it a terrorist attack.
And you're exactly right with that Boston marathon thing. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, and we can't buy anything that they say hook, line, and sinker, because you can't believe a liar. That's it. Just can't believe a liar, because we've been lied to. We constantly be lied to, and it's coming out, and people are being released from prison because they were set up. Like the prosecutor in Somerset County in my state, the neighboring city from where I live at. Nicholas Bissell was setting people up, locking people up, and he was a feared prosecutor.
And brother, enemy's public, I didn't mean to cut you off, brother, but if you remember, and I know you do, it was a war on drugs before it was a war on terrorists. So the war on drugs basically carried into the war on terrorism. Am I right, my brother?
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And we were the targets of both wars.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 110%. That's why I brought up that point. But you can keep going, my brother.
We was the target on both wars, and it went from being a war on drugs to the war of drugs, because when you are caught with pure cocaine, you get a slap on the wrist. You're caught with crack, you're going away for a long time. And it was based on proximity, because we all know who did the crack cocaine versus who do the pure cocaine. People with money do cocaine. People who want a quick high that's cheap do crack. And they were doing it like that. A lot of people were going to prison for a long time who were addicts. They were sending addicts to prison for a long time, but now they got this opioid, pandemic, and they want to call them victims, because it's not us who are suffering from opioid abuse for the most part. It's them. Just like I'm going to go there with this Carly Russell young lady. They want to write a bill and put her name on it. How are you going to write a bill and put her name on it when your people have been doing what she did for a long damn time? But when a black woman do it, they want to put her name on it, with the Susan Smiths and all these other people who drown their own kids, saying a black man did it. That's worse than what that young sister did. Or a man kill his wife and say somebody drove by and shot her. Miss him, but shot her. We need to be mindful of the setup. Yeah, but Nicholas Bissell was setting people up. And if anybody watched the For Life series on Channel 7, it was based on the brother in Somerset County. They put it in New York because 50 Cent from New York, he exactly produced it. But Isaac Wright was from Somerset County, the neighboring city of where I'm from. They based that whole series on Isaac Wright, who ran for mayor a few years ago when Eric Adams won. They based that on him. He was set up and sent to prison for life. For life. But he studied the law, learned the law, became a attorney while he was in prison. And he was working for the Innocence Project. He was representing prisoners and getting prisoners out of prison as a prisoner. He stayed in so long because they wouldn't give him his discovery. But once his attorney got his discovery, everybody that was involved in that plot to have him in prison went to jail. Police officers, judges. The prosecutor was going to do life in prison, but he flew to Vegas and killed himself because he couldn't deal with what he dished out. These people have been crooked from its inception. Now, you was born in the 60s.
Big facts, brother. Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? We both know these federal government, these agencies wicked as hell. Always set us up, our people up.
Yes, sir.
Always have. Now, the Secret Service man that was protecting Dr. King was taken off the detail because they wanted to kill the man. They said they were sending him home for his protection. And the man was like, no. He said, that's an order. Go home. I saw the interview of the agent. He wanted to stay there and made sure Dr. King was safe. But he was taken off the post and sent home. All the black FBI agents and CIA agents was taken off the post. So they wanted to make sure that brother was murdered that day. That's how wicked these people is. And they haven't changed. They have not changed, and they won't change.
And then, brother, enemies public. You know, to top off that story, you know, the bullet didn't kill him. Martin Luther King, he basically got killed in a hospital. One of them doctors suffocated. So if they didn't get him with the bullet, they were going to make sure they got him with one of the alleged doctors.
Brother, I know that part is true. But, they probably did even more than that, brother. They probably was beating on that brother and everything. I remember hearing that story about him being suffocated. The same Malcolm was. You don't do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to somebody who was shot, got bullet holes in their chest. He was murdered too. Wanted to make sure those two men was dead. They wanted to make sure they was dead. But this agency, FBI agents, the FBI, the CIA, all these agencies, all the way down to the local down police, all are wicked. They entrap the people, they set up stings, and they create terrorism. Salute, peace, greetings to Doe Eyes TV. Thanks for coming through.
Much love and respect, those eyes.
And our people need to understand it. And I want to say this one more time before I end this stream. When somebody comes to you in your organization, whether it's in your organization or they coming to you as an individual, suggesting to you that you in concert with them do something you know makes no sense, that's harmful to somebody, illegal, that's a damn agent. And get that person away from you. I was told this a long time ago. They're going to come to you like your brother, but it's not your brother. And one of them is the obvious. They're going to send somebody who look like you. They're going to send somebody that they're going to teach them the lingo and learn the lingo. But I say this, if we find them out, I said before, justice is a reward or a penalty. When you try to infiltrate and destroy what we're trying to build on behalf of our people, you are on the penalty side of justice, and we're going to deal with your ass accordingly. And that's how we shouldn't allow people to do that and walk around. We out here trying to do good. We're not breaking laws. We're not doing anything nefarious. Salute to Ram Ram. Thanks for coming through. And you will have somebody come and infiltrate and destroy and neutralize what we're trying to do. You serve to our detriment. You serving to our detriment should be your detriment. They do it because they don't fear a consequence, and they think they got somebody to hide behind and protect them from us. Shouldn't be no hiding place. It shouldn't be no one able to protect them from us if they get in the way of what we're trying to do on behalf of our people. I hope the information that was shared today was informative and enlightening, and shed light to this situation in this topic matter or this subject matter. Good brother, do you have anything to add closing before I end this stream? Brother stepped away.
Yeah, I'm here, brother. Much love and respect to you and the family. Much love and respect to everybody in the chat. Excellent presentation. Thank you for letting me up, brother. Enjoy your night. Peace.
I appreciate you coming up. Salute to you. Peace. Honor, love, and respect to you and your family. Before I end the stream, I want to thank everybody individually for coming up and joining the brother this evening. Ram Ram, thanks for coming through. Doe Eyes TV, thank you. Raborn, thank you. The Drake Cobbs Music, thank you. JP, the Inspiring Matriarch, thank you. P. Moses, thank you. Big Dog Philly OG, thanks for coming through and thanks for coming up. Silentium, thank you for coming up. Coming through. Appreciate that. Bronze Flat Power God, thanks for coming through, good brother. King of Higher Self, thanks for coming through, good brother. I appreciate that. I say it like this. When it comes to people trying to infiltrate our organizations and trying to get us to do nefarious things and coming as a brother, not behaving brotherly, I have a saying. If you can't change the people around you, just change the people around you. This is The Enemy's Public. I am Bro.Nasir. Like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section. Peace.
Yo, the enemy's public, I gotta keep my eyes open. Pay attention, stop walking around like you blindfolded. This not the World Cup, but Nasir be kicking knowledge. This the type of information you can never learn in college. It's time to fight back, it's no more trying to play it cool. We got interviews, podcasts, and got the latest news. So sit back and relax, we about to get it started. Earth is a canvas, and guess who's the con artist? They brainwashing us, the system corrupted. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. I said you are now rocking with the enemy's public. Hey.